Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to tea time. I hope you're all doing very well. Hey, Arya, Coco, and Emia. Hope you're doing very well. I know that Arya and Coco's right here, so hopefully they are. Hey, Gaza. I'm doing very well. Got up a bit late, but other than that, I'm good. Hey, Keziah, how are you doing? And Gazel. So, today we have a clip from Gazel again, where they asked to see if there's anything they can improve doing dungeon pulls as a scholar. So the specific stipulation or explanation that I got is that the first third of the dungeon packs are done in the way that Gazel normally does it. The second third, they're doing it in the way that my guides typically explain it, or they at least try to. And in the third third, they're doing it their way again. That is the general gist of it. Now the thing is that healing dungeon pulls, it's not that crucial to do it in a specific way. Like, if you're spamming Art of War on the trash pack basically from start to finish, and you're not like, on the following pull you're suddenly in trouble because you're missing cooldowns or something, then it doesn't really matter which order you do things in. If you find it difficult to do it the way that you're doing it, that's a different story. If you feel like the effectiveness of the way you're doing it depends heavily on what your tank is, then it might be a different story. For instance, as Matthew put it, just have a warrior tank so it doesn't matter what you do. So what I mean by that is, for example, the two common strategies that scholars use is, if you have recitation, you either use recitation in like a dungeon pull on Excogitation or Adlocurium. That is like the two things. The thing I've seen a lot of scholars actually say is that, like, often they don't actually include Excogitation in their lineup at all. Like, not in the slightest. Which, like, if it doesn't pop, then you weren't missing it, right? So it's fine. But the reason why it might be a mistake is because some tanks actually play around Excogitation. Like, if I'm playing a tank and I see I have Excogitation, then I'm safe. I might play in such a way that Excogitation never pops, that's a different story, but the fact that Excogitation is there means that the scholar doesn't have to worry nearly as much about using their cooldowns in the first place, as long as Excogitation holds. Now, if you're going with like a strict strategy, like you're going to use the same cooldowns every single time, regardless of what the tank is going to do, then it doesn't help you very much. But if you are like, okay, I'm going to use Excogitation and then put down Sacred Soil, and then we'll see what we need later, then you have the advantage, if the tank plays around Excogitation, that they will use their cooldowns to make sure that you won't need to use anything else. Like, they're going to make that Excogitation last if they can, just because it is a safety net for them too. Is how I view it usually when I'm tanking. Santo says Excog is really nice, and Santo, I know, is a Gunbreaker main, so as an example. But yeah, my point is that there are many ways to heal a dungeon. Any healer, for that matter, has many ways to heal a dungeon. And if your strategy works, and you can attack as much as you need, or as much as you want, and you don't run out of cooldowns, then you don't have to go and seek other strategies. You don't have to, like maybe there's an easier strategy that requires even less effort, but as long as your strategy works, that's fine. Hey Eyeless Camper and hey Kwasari. And Garcel says, personally, Dark Knight is the most difficult to heal in dungeons. Yeah, that is, I believe that is a pretty common consensus. That is primarily because Dark Knight's self-healing is not good. Not good. They have Abyssal Drain. For AoE pack, they have Abyssal Drain. And then they have Living Dead. They have that too, but technically, because of how Living Dead works, which I went over in the video from yesterday, Living Dead actually is more akin to a benediction than a huge self-healing cooldown, because it stops healing you. Like, it stops healing you if you like reach the Undead Rebirth part, and the Dark Knight can heal themselves through that, but you can help them too. So Living Dead is basically one benediction, approximately one benediction, just piecemealed out. Like if you're on an AoE pack, Living Dead will instantly fully heal the Dark Knight, but it stops healing after that. Eyeless Camper says, I want to thank you very much for all your great guides, they're invaluable. Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that. And Eric Miller says, true, Abyssal Drain is one full heal for what it's worth. It's complicated, exactly, because Abyssal Drain, it can heal a lot, but not using it means damage loss. Like, if you think about it, if you're sitting on it until you need the full heal, and even then, I just want to highlight that Bloodwetting actually heals for twice as much per... I don't understand why Abyssal Drain is only 200. Like, it for a cooldown, it should be like 300 or 400, honestly. Like, just spitballing here, like, it should be more. It should heal for more, and also Carven Spit should also heal, in my opinion. Like... That's just, like, that's what I feel, is that Abyssal Drain should heal for more, and then also Carven Spit should heal for something, so that you don't have to go, oh, I need to use Abyssal Drain for the healing, or something. Hey Gilano, how are you doing? Kasadi says, I swear, Living Dead is one of the most misunderstood cooldowns by a quite large margin. Living Dead is like a master class in how do you even read a tooltip. Because it's not obvious. Like, it's not obvious. That's why I spent so long in my guide yesterday explaining how it works. Like, the only thing, like, I can't really point at the things so well here. Let me just here we go. I have a Living Dead tooltip on a stick. This part, you just see, can you actually see it? Yeah, so this part, like right here, is when the Living Dead tooltip actually ends. Like right here. This, all this, up like down to the Walking Dead duration, is only the Walking Dead effect. So from here down to here is Walking Dead. Which also means, and you're just supposed to know that all of this, like actually everything from here and up to here does not apply to Undead Rebirth. Like, the entire effect of Undead Rebirth is just this. Like, this 2 lines. For some reason, the agreed upon style of tooltips is that every effect in a tooltip ends with its duration. That's like the period at the end. Like, it does this, and it has this duration. Next thing, and they don't even say, and then starts Walking Dead. You just have to know that. It's really funny. Kasadi says, I see a lot of people saying it's 20 seconds of potentially not dying. The annoying part about that statement is that it's technically true. It can be true. Like, it can be true. It's not really going to work out like that, but technically yes. Like, if you know that a thing is going to kill you in 9.9 seconds, you can use Living Dead, and then in 9.9 seconds you're technically not able to die, and then when Living Dead is changed to Walking Dead, it resets to 10 seconds again. Which is why it says Walking Dead duration 10 seconds here. It resets to another 10 seconds. Which means that you technically had, well, you had 19.9 seconds, right? It's basically 20 seconds. But the reality is that Living Dead protects you from death for anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds, depending on when it activates. And it can also, it lasts anywhere between 10 seconds and then anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds. Because if you don't die within the first 10 seconds, you don't get another 10, it's just over. And then you die. Gazel says, every time I see Dark Knights using Living Dead, I would freak out and start spamming heals immediately before anything occurs. Yeah, so from the healer's perspective, here's a little crash course in what are you supposed to do as the healer when you see Living Dead. So what you're supposed to do as a healer, if you trust that the tank will actually die if you don't do anything within the next 10 seconds, is to do nothing. Like, if you could, without like losing anything on your part, the scholar would actually be better off if they could somehow just tell their pet to stuff it for a second and not do anything. Like, that would actually be beneficial, because you want the Dark Knight to die. They've already clicked the cooldown. They basically already clicked Benediction. You just need to do nothing at all. Then it'll happen. You just have to let it happen. But the thing is that when you see, as a healer, when you see the invulnerability come out, it doesn't matter whether it's Holmgang, which actually requires participation of the healer for the tank to not die, potentially. Hallowed Ground, which might mean that the paladin needs help, and Super Bolide, which requires immediate assistance, right? Living Dead, uniquely amongst them, requires that you don't help the Dark Knight. Otherwise, things are going to go wrong, as Matthew says, and then the Dark Knight dies after 11 seconds. Exactly. It's not easy, because you have to let the tank die. And hey, Licky, how are you doing? Gazel says, using steady pet action. Is that still a thing? Does that work? Does that work? Apparently it does. That is really funny. Apparently, yeah, you could do that, Gazel. You could do that. Don't bother. You don't have to do that. Apparently it works. Yeah, you could actually do that. Like, if you have the space to do that while the tank is using their invulnerability, yeah, you could do that. You could do that. That is really funny. that actually works. I didn't expect that. I thought because it says attack, it wouldn't work. That is really, really funny. But yeah, that would be a strategy. Kasadi says, on another note, I'm making art over here. Oh, what are you making? You don't need... so, Gazel, the reason why I'm saying don't bother is because you need both steady and guard to do this. And it's so specific. If the Dark Knight is using Living Dead and they intend to die, they typically have accounted for the fact that the healer's going to heal them at least a bit by accident. And some of that healing is going to be like heal over time effects that are already there and the pet. So you don't have to do that. But from the healer's perspective, the most effective way you could approach seeing Living Dead is to just stop everything and tell your pet to not do anything. But it's not worth the 2 keybinds, because you need to both use steady to stop your pet and then use guard again to get your pet to heal again once Living Dead turns into Walking Dead. So it's just, it's too much for too little. Like, it's too much for too little. Because usually, if the Dark Knight is actually going to die, you will heal, like, twice. Your pet will manage to do, like, 2 embraces in the time frame where it matters. 2. And they heal for like 4,000, right? Maybe a bit more. So it's going to be like 10% of the Dark Knight's health that they'll regain. It's not going to be the thing that makes or breaks it. But it's just, hypothetically, if you wanted to perfect it, then you should stop even your pet from healing. But yeah, as Kwasadi said, technically, Living Dead can be a protection from dying for up to 20 seconds. But it requires that the protection is actually activated exactly when Living Dead is supposed to end, and I don't recommend doing that. Also something Eric Miller said, I tried using a notification macro for it. That sometimes helps. We actually talked about that on the Discord a while back. The reason why that only helps sometimes is because so we go into to imaginary world for a second. You're in a dungeon. Your tank is dying. You need to throw everything and the kitchen sink at them to save the tank. By the way, your tank is a Dark Knight. Your tank clicks Living Dead. Some weird notification noise plays. Something's happening down there in the chat log. Are you looking at that, or are you looking at your tank dying right now? Are you reading the message your tank wrote, or are you looking at your cooldowns and your party frames? You're probably not looking at the text in the chat log, because if you're looking at the text in the chat log, then you're not looking at the Living Dead buff that the tank just got. And if you have the space and the excess energy while dealing with this situation to read the chat log, then you're probably good enough to recognize Living Dead in the first place, and so you didn't need the notification. So it might work for some, but often it is not needed. You don't need it because the healers that need the notification will not read it, and the healers that don't need the notification, well, they didn't need it in the first place. But if you feel that healers are more responsive to you using Living Dead when you have the macro, then keep using it. Whether it works for you is what's the most important bit. I'm just saying that from my perspective, if I'm the healer, I see Living Dead and I stop healing. And you don't have to notify me. I'll see it. Licky says, I did that in E10S to be immune during Tank Buster 1 and 3. Not worth it outside of speed kills. Well, if you have an invulnerability, and you're like not using it for anything else while doing Savage, then it's not a bad idea to use it. Like, I would imagine that you don't randomly die to something as a tank in a Savage raid, as far as I know. And if you do, then I would imagine that, like, Living Dead, for example, might already be on cooldown or not be the highest priority that you will think about as you die to that mechanic. So it's better in like a Savage context, in my opinion, to plan when you're going to use your invulnerability so that you use it. Coco says, I'm in a dungeon. Kai is dying. I throw a sink at him. Bring! What was that? Exactly. Coco's got it. And Lakey says, the best thing you can do is learn what Living Dead sounds like. Learning what things in the game sound like can be very helpful. If you're in a dungeon, one way to get better acquainted with what is like, if you've played the jobs, then you know what it looks like from your perspective. Now, if you do this, you can actually see the animation of your friends using the spell, which helps you to recognize it, and then eventually you'll be able to recognize it with just the sound or the character movement. Like, if you've played Machinist enough, you can see where a Machinist is in their 1-2-3 combo based on the movement that the character's doing, regardless of the sounds or not. So that is not a bad idea. A lot of players play with loud music though, so the sound might not go through very well. Kyle says, what's up? First time in a live. Welcome. I hope you're doing well. And Gasadi is drawing their Final Fantasy character in a bit risque. Oh. Well, I hope it comes out nice. But yeah, the problem with Living Dead is that to use it optimally requires that someone other than yourself knows how it works. Like, to use Living Dead perfectly, the healer needs to know what Living Dead is. Which circles back to another thing I talk about often in terms of mastering jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. If you, let's say you want to be the best white mage ever, right? Someone might want to be that. You won't become the best white mage in the world if you never tried any other job. Not because you need to master, like, warrior to be able to play white mage well, but knowing how the warrior thinks might help you play better as a white mage. Knowing how your co-healer thinks, whether they're a sage or a scholar, or in the rare case an astrologian, might help you play better. Might help you use your cooldowns better, because you know what the other healer's probably thinking that they're going to do. And the same applies. Like, you don't have to learn everything there is to know about every other job in the game, but just trying all of the other jobs gives you, like, just a little bit, gives you a huge amount of knowledge about those jobs. Like, if you play only white mage and then occasionally you tank something with warrior, that tells you very little about how paladin or gunbreaker or even dark knight thinks, because warrior is just, you know, I just have to live until the next blood wedding and then I'm fine again. And then you use blood wedding and then you're fine. And then you go, I'll just have to live to the next blood wedding and then I'll be fine again. And that's a shockingly huge amount of tanking as a warrior. I'm immortal during blood wedding, so I just need to, like, make do in between my immortality. Right? But that's not how a paladin or a gunbreaker thinks. And the Dark Knight doesn't think like that either. So trying each tank gives you more, like, perspective as a healer. And playing DPS jobs gives you more perspective as a healer. Like, the white mage that has never played a black mage does not understand why the black mage takes so long to leap out of their ley lines when the ley lines are in the bad stuff, right? The healer does not understand why the black mage cares so much about that. Now the reason is often that the good black mage has planned a triple cast soon. Like it is in the calendar somewhere. It is on the calendar somewhere. And the black mage is going to dodge the mechanic. It is coming, and it is coming before the attack actually resolves. But you don't know for sure unless you play black mage a bit yourself. And it's just an example. Like, this applies to most jobs. Like, learning how other jobs think, how other jobs play, helps you get better at the job you like. Like, if you play Scholar only and never Sage, then you will find it incredibly annoying that every time you do that recitation Aldacurium deployment tactics, the Sage comes in and goes, Eucratian Prognosis, and replaces your shield with a objectively worse shield, right? But the Sage did it because they want an Adder Sting. They don't actually care about the shield, but they want the Adder Sting. And if you then play Sage and you like learn that, or you're a Sage main and you see the Scholars do the deployment tactics thing, like, you don't, if you have never played Scholar, you don't know for sure whether your Eucratian Prognosis actually ruins something for the Scholar. I mean, outside of ruining the shields, but you know what I mean. So like, trying everything can be helpful. Try everything. Kyle says, I'm the same person that asked you to remake Dark Knight and Black Mage videos. Oh, I know. I think I know. You were writing something on my Dark Knight video yesterday. The reason why it has two different names is because the @ name that you have, a lot of people have like @ and then some name with no spaces now, is not shown in the live chat for some reason, and it is not shown everywhere. But the @ name is shown in a lot more places now. Like, it's gradually replacing everywhere, so eventually it might be in the live chat as well. For some reason. Use a Eucratian diagnosis instead. Red says, hello, just want to say your guides are really helpful for a sprout like me. Appreciate what you're doing for the community. Thank you, I'm glad to hear that, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, exactly, Gazel. If your co-healer is a Sage and you're a Scholar, you might as well, like, just to really hammer home the point, depending on how aggressively the Sage is using their shields, as a Scholar, sometimes it might just be best to do this for the rest of the trial, or Alliance raid, or normal raid, or whatever you're doing. Because it's not happening. You can also do this. You don't need that if you don't have any shields anyway, right? Yeah. Looking at your toolkit like this might make you feel extremely helpless if you're used to relying on your on all of your cooldown, like on all of your healing spells. Pedro says, remember where we were talking about no cross data center play? What do you mean? You mean on Discord? Or did you mean something else? Good morning. Yeah, you can travel between any data center in your region. This has been true for most of Endwalker, I believe. They didn't make like a huge, and like it is easy to miss it. It is easy to miss it, and it's not entirely obvious how to use it if you don't look it up. That's why I actually have a short dedicated to explaining how to do it on my channel. Eric Miller says, are you actually using 7, 8, and 9 on your keyboard and in combination with Shift, or do you click? I have an MMO mouse. I actually use the front 3 buttons here for these 3. You can see on screen. And the second row, you can see axis is 7, 8, 9. So no, I don't. I am cheating, as you can see. And they could have been bound to anything. So they're bound to this, so that it makes sense in my head. But the important part about my UI setup is that the left half of my keybinds are done with my left hand, and the right hand part of my keybinds are done with my right hand. And yeah, now you also realize that it's all smoke and mirrors, because my camera is also mirrored. Kyle, my suggestion, if you're having a hard time picking up Sage, is try lower level dungeons. Like, to put an extreme example, if you do Sastasha, you only have up to level 18 in your toolkit. And that means that you only have to worry about doses, diagnosis, cardia and prognosis, and race, and these. But with so few buttons, you can focus on that. You can focus on, okay, I want to primarily heal by attacking. I only use diagnosis if I have to. I only use prognosis if I have to. I'm going to be attacking to heal primarily. If you do Sastasha, you don't even have your dodge. That is correct. You get that at level 30, because that's when you get your crazier. Yeah, I would recommend that. And then, like, gradually increase the level difficulty or level of dungeons that you're doing, so that you get more tools to work with. By like reducing the amount, you can focus on learning those tools. Like if your second dungeon is Bravelock's Longstop, then you get Physis, Flavor and Eucrasia introduced. So now you have a dot to manage, you have a cooldown attack to manage, and you have a heal over time cooldown to manage. And that's not that much to introduce. The difficult part about picking up Sage, in my opinion, is that the game goes, here you go, and then they give you a Scholar's Toolkit at level 70 with a few adjustments. But basically, they give you this. Like, they give you all of this, like from here and up, and go, good luck, take that. Sage is considered very easy. The problem is simply that it is a little bit of an information overload to pick up the job in the first place. Right. Should we take a look at the actual clip that Gazel has sent me, or sent us? So, Gazel plays the game on Japanese. So, we will have to guess a little bit at what the actions are if we are not sure. And I'm probably going to be watching this, like skipping around a little bit, because it's a pretty long, it's a 12-minute dungeon from start to finish. We might not need to see everything to understand everything. And the key point is there anything that could be done different in the pulls, I would say. Is that right, Gazel? It's mainly the dungeon pulls, right? Or is it also the bosses that you were thinking about? Let me just get that back again. So, the initial move is Protraction, Recitation, Swiftcast, Adlocurium. Maybe also the bosses, since I don't heal much there. I mean, we can see what happens. I'll probably go a little faster as we get further. Yeah, you can see there's the recited Adlocurium. And then the question is, ultimately, And there was also the deployment tactics. That can be helpful. Like, if you don't know if the DPS are going to over aggro, it's not a bad idea to already have a shield. Now, if the shields don't move at all, then the deployment tactics was, of course, unnecessary. And there's the Sacred Soil, which is good. And then... Oh, you used Seraph there. So you used Seraph, and then you use Consolation to apply shield to everyone. Just to clarify why that put a stop to me. So your tank has a shield and is on full health. Your pet is doing nothing right now. Like, actually nothing. Like, zero. Just hanging out, just partying next to you. Now you summon Seraph, who is also doing nothing. Seraph is still doing nothing. She's had about at least one Seraphic Veil wasted, because she didn't have anything to use it on. There she used Consolation, that is something. She's not done something for around 2 GCDs now. She casts every 3 seconds. And... Oh, there your tank took damage. And there is... That is also, I would say that might not be optimal. I don't actually know for sure if it can cost your Seraph a cast if you use things like Whispering Dawn during Seraph. The important thing is that the cooldowns during Seraph actually aren't better than the ordinary ones. I think it's called Angel's Whisper, the Seraph variant. Yeah, it heals for the same amount as Whispering Dawn. So there's no, like... If it has even the possibility of causing your Seraph to miss a cast of Seraphic Veil, there's no reason to do that. There has been, I think there's been 1 or 2 Seraphic Veil casts. There was another one there. Might have been another one there. Oh, when did you use... You used it there, you used Consolation. So that was the first pull. So, in the first pull, you used your Recitation and your Protraction, and that's good. That's fine, that's perfect. And then you also used Swiftcast, which is also fine, and used it on Adlocuum. I would have done that too. Probably wouldn't. I wouldn't have used Recitation on Adlocuum. We've talked about this. You also used Sacred Soil, which I would have also done. And then you used Summon Seraph. I would say, if everyone's topped up, there's no reason to use Summon Seraph. Like, you can, if you want. You can, but you don't have to. Like, that is maybe a little wasteful. You also used Whispering Dawn. That is fine. Whispering Dawn is probably ready for the next pull as well, so it doesn't really matter. There's nothing wrong with using Summon Seraph either. If you're going to use, like, if you don't need Summon Seraph for this next upcoming pull for anything, then you're not going, like, there's no loss in using it. It's just observation that was kinda wasteful, right? So, for the second pull, we see Excogitation on the tank. That is fine. Let me just test something here. So this is like a really, really, really extreme point of optimization, but Excogitation is probably going to pop anyway. So you used it here, not in combat, which means that you get no fairy gauge for it. If you used it now, you would have actually gotten Fairy Gauge for it. So if you had delayed Excogitation to now, yes, then Excogitation would have been at 45 and not 37 now. But you would have gotten 10 Fairy Gauge. But on the other hand, Gazel, you did mention that you felt like you didn't use the Fairy Gauge very much in this dungeon. So that might be a reason why you didn't think that much about it, right? If you're not really using it, then you possibly didn't notice that it didn't make any difference. There's also another thing. This is also like super overkill, exaggerated optimization, but if we just go back to here, like here, which one is best is hard to say. I would say the big wolf man over here. If we use chain stratagem on him, he might die sooner. You can see here, I'm pretty sure this one is the big wolf, because he has a lot more HP than all of the other mobs in this pool. If you use chain stratagem on him when the pull, like when everything was clumped up, he would have taken more damage. He would still have died earlier than this, so it wouldn't actually affect the pull. As you can see, in hindsight, it wouldn't have made a difference. But that chain stratagem is almost certainly going to be ready when we reach the boss fight anyway. So that was a free damage buff you could have used. Like, you could have used it. As it turns out, hindsight 2020, you didn't need it. If you had done as I would have done, it wouldn't have changed anything. It wouldn't have changed anything, but maybe it could. Like, in some groups, it might have changed something. Like, if the wolf was last to die, it might have not been in that situation. There's also something with this specific pack, and that is also like a numbers thing. So, Art of War does 900 potency when there's 5 targets, so 900. If there's 4 targets, it does 720, and Biolysis does 70 per tick, so that's 700 in total. So, because the pool is like 6 dudes, you would have actually been better served is if right here, so you can see it's a little annoying that I can only move it like 1 frame at a time and see what I'm working with. Right here. Wait, what do you use there? Is that Biolysis? That is actually Art of War. So that is correct. So use Biolysis there, good. Then use Art of War there, I think. Didn't you? Didn't you? So Art of War, what I would have done different here is, let's see. So your sprint isn't ready. So what you could do here for like some really excessive optimization for your tank is to use Expedient here, which you did, as I can see. But then, instead of running ahead like this, you should stay with the pack and just run in front of it and repeatedly use Art of War. That would do more damage than putting bio on everything one by one. Like the instant there's 4 targets within range, like clumped up within range, you can actually just spam Art of War. Like if you can hit 4 things with Art of War, then it's better than using bio. With a little asterisk on that, if you're using Art of War on 4 things, leading to like 1 dude surviving at the end of the pull for like an extra 20 seconds for some reason, then of course it wasn't better. But again, that is like, it's like super specific. Like if there's only 2 targets or 2 or 3 targets, a Gunbreaker is incentivized to use Gnashing Fang. But if you're using Gnashing Fang on the weakest mob, then you kill that, and then you turn and kill another one, and some of your other players might still be cleaving. better to use your big single target attack on the healthiest mob to keep everything dying together. It is like really, really small optimization. Like, yeah, most people don't think too hard on that. But yeah, in this case, you could have saved yourself a lot of effort by just sticking with the group and spamming Art of War. And let's see, how long did the... So actually, I think that is actually perfectly fine. Like, you had already planned what are you going to be using your last ether flow on. You spend it and then you use ether flow. Like, those 3 or 4 seconds is insignificant. And I thought, did you continue to apply dots? I mean, with the mobs far away, that dot was justified. But again, you could, like... I'm not going to be like the teacher that gives you minus points for making a mistake 8 times. Like, in the position you were in here, the best thing you could do was use Biolysis because you were already here. But now you should of course be spamming Art of War, right? Wait, did you use... Was that... What happened there? So you actually applied your dot to every single thing, it looks like. But yeah, my point is, as I said before, once there's 4 enemies in range, you just use Art of War. Very boring. But that is like because of Art of War being extremely broken in terms of damage, like absurdly strong. You just use that. If there's 4 targets in range and you want to kill all 4 targets, then you just use Art of War. Like, there's very few exceptions. Like, hey, maybe it's a boss fight and there's actually 4 mobs and a boss. Then, hey, maybe you want to keep Biolysis on the boss to keep the damage up on him. But overall, if there are 4 targets in range, you have 1 attack. And energy drain, like, oh yeah, energy drain. If you don't need it, you could use that. Let me just wind this back and focus a little bit more on the actual healing happening. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, Expedient was used to reach the next pack. That's fine. That also works. Personally, I would probably use Expedient as the pull began, but that's also fine. Right, so first observation, that tank is not using any defensives. So keep that in mind, everyone, as you see the tank's HP just nosedive. The tank isn't doing anything. So far, Gazel has put down Sacred Soil and given them Excogitation. Excogitation activated there. It was not recited, so it healed for a decent amount, but not huge. Tank hasn't used any defensives. What happened there? The tank got a big heal from something. So your heal came up there. And there you used Fey Blessing. And the tank also got another heal. They used Holy Circle in that instant. That's why the heal was a bit bigger. And there, Whispering Dawn. Very good. Now the tank actually used a defensive cooldown. That is correct, Jacob. Excock triggers at 50%. That is why it triggered right there. The tank went to like 50,000 HP and then jumped up to like 77,000 from the Excogitation. So here, the tank is actually like, it's as if they suddenly remembered that they're tanking. And because you can see here, Fight or Flight came up, Holy Sheltron came up, and oh, there's Requiescent. And it actually goes off screen, but you can see Bulwark is over here. For your own aesthetic pleasure, Gazel, let me see if I can find this. You might want to not have this set to 10. You can't see all 10 anyway. You can see, let's see, 3, 6, 8. The 9th one like goes off screen. Like either like you could Like, it might be fine. Like, if you can recognize the buff from this, then you can go with 9, but there's no reason to set it to 10. You could set it to 8. 3, 6, 8, yeah. And then it wouldn't look like this. I don't know if you care about that, but just... it's something I thought about. Yeah, suddenly the tank just goes, oh, right! Defensive cooldowns! Blap! Let me just take this again. So Whispering Dawn, and the tank is at 48%. You don't do anything. It's probably fine. We're probably fine. We're probably fine. The Excogitation came up here. Did you not use anything for that? That is actually surprising. I mean, you used Lucid Dreaming. Nice. Yeah, that is good. Paladins actually heal for a surprising amount during their requiescent window. Yeah. Kyle says, I believe that if you can play Black Mage, you can play any job. Well, you might be able to play a lot of jobs if you can play Black Mage. There are some players that only know how to play Black Mage. But yeah, I think a really good tip from this that everyone can take from this is so if you were uncertain whether your tank needed any help, you could have used Excogitation here just fine. Like, you could have just used it. It would, like, at this point where Excogitation became ready, right here, you could use Excogitation here. Like, just in case the Paladin needs it, like, then it's there. If they don't need it, then it'll probably pop early in the boss fight, and that's fine. Of course, if you're planning to use 3 energy drains at the start of the boss, then that's a lot more like that. Then it makes sense that you didn't use anything. So here we have the recited Adocurium into. We had deployment tactics. So now we have a problem actually. Yeah, Jacob says there is no AoE version of Energy Drain, right? That is Summoner only. That is Energy Siphon, and it is better on 3 or more targets. So, see here, you have 3 ether flows. It takes around 3 GCDs to actually use 3 ether flows at the fastest, right? Unless you're using it on different things. So here you're still fine. Now you need to use Energy Drain. You didn't. Now you need to use Energy Drain. You didn't. Now you need to use Energy Drain. You didn't. Now Ether Flow is ready. And what did you spend your Ether Flows on? Let me just take that. Use Energy Drain. Energy Drain. And then you... Wait, did you double weave 2 Energy Drains? You used Ruin 2 to use Energy Drain. So it's technically better than not doing it, but Ruin 2 is like 75 less potency than Broil. So I don't know. I would probably have said, like, of course, you had already made the mistake. So there was not much you could do, right? There's not much you could do to fix it. But I would probably have said use Broil and Energy Drain a third time. Because the potency lost from using Ruin 2 makes the potency gained from using Energy Drain very small. But the main problem here is that you didn't have the time, like Etherflow was here, ready to go. And then you use more energy drain. And then you use ether flow. Did you use energy drain one more time? Or did you use sacred soil there? Yep, sacred soil. Fine. That is not bad. Some healing in case anyone needs it. Like, that is not bad. That is not a bad idea. Eric Miller says, does this game have the biggest shield applies and can only be overridden by an even bigger shield, or is it the last shield casted will be applied? If it is you casting both shields, then it is only a bigger shield can override. If it is someone else using a shield that is incompatible with that shield, then their shield will take precedence. For example, if you use Adlocurium on your tank, and then you use Recitation to guarantee a critical hit and use Adlocurium on your tank, then the recited Adlocurium will take preference. If you use Recitation Adlocurium first and then cast Adlocurium again, then the only reason that the new Adlocurium will override the old one is if the old one has already been damaged so much that it is now smaller than the new shield. But if a cheeky sage comes in and goes, Eucrasian diagnosis, and their diagnosis crits, or not, actually, theirs will override yours. The exception being that Eucrasian diagnosis, just like Adlocurium, has a separate buff for the extra double shield that comes when you crit. So I believe that would be overridden separately. So like if you get a critical Eucrasian diagnosis, it will override both things. But if you just do a Eucrasian diagnosis and it doesn't crit, then you will keep the what's it called, catalyze effect from the critical Adlocurium. Yeah, it is very confusing. If you're alone, the only barrier healer, then the rule is bigger shield wins. If there's anyone else applying barriers, then their shield will win over yours and vice versa. That is why it can be a problem if you have both a scholar and a sage, or two sages or two scholars in the same party. It's mostly a problem if there's a sage plus any other barrier healer, because, you know, the sages need their shields to break for their adder sting mechanic. Also, hey Kitsudeko, I hope you're doing well. Yeah, in this situation that Gazel was put in, where they had 6 ether flows ready to party, and like 6 extra ether flows notably, and they just went to to town using everything. It's not bad. That's good. Another thing you could do, if we just speed through this boss fight, for the most part, it seems like you have this under control. You're using Sacred Soil very efficiently, and you have Whispering Dawn. And there's a stack marker, and does Sacred Soil last? It does. Excellent. Very good timing. But a trick you could use, very, very smart, you could use this Dissipation now. Like right now, you could use Dissipation if it wasn't on cooldown. Why that would be nice is because then, like, well, if you had that, that means that here you could spam energy drains to spend your last ether flow. Then, right here, you get Dissipation, 3 new ether flows, and now you have a 30-second buff that makes it so that your Adlocuriums are 20% bigger. Around 20% bigger. Whoa. Nice speed up. Nice edit. So you have put protection up. Excogitation as well. And that is, of course, now this part you're doing what my guide says you should do. Also, hey me, who else? I hope you're doing well. So now Gazel is trying to do what my guide says you should do. Now, the first mistake here is that you should have waited with protraction until you were closer to combat, so that the Excog will give you Fairy Gauge. But you already made that mistake earlier, so of course, I already told you. we talked about this, but it happened again. Then you used Swift Cast and Adlocurium. Did you also use Deployment Tactics? I actually have a hard time finding your Deployment Tactics. Oh, it's there. So yeah, you use Deployment Tactics, that's fine. and use biolysis. There's many targets you could use out of war, but that's fine. I can see your strategy is you just click down the list, which is also a very good way to just focus on that. And of course get the loot. I agree, I would do the same. Can you jump over that? Hold on, what? What? I didn't know you could do that. I always run up the stairs because I thought that was a fake wall. I thought that was like an actual wall right here. Because it normally would be. You just jump over that. I didn't know you could do that. Obviously from the map we can see that there's not a wall there. So I should have known, but that surprised me. Another biolysis. Sacred soil is down, that is good. And then you just spam out of war, right? And there's energy drain because ether flow is ready, very good. Time to get the loot, perfect. And then you use Whispering Dawn here, that is good. There's healing to be done. And you're using pet moves before your own tools. Aside from Sacred Soil, of course, which I also recommend. And we can see, well, we can also see that the tank is a little bit more awake with their cooldowns in this pool, so that also matters. And there's Expedient that I would probably I would say it's probably better if you used Expedient here, but that's fine. We can also see that Excogitation ultimately didn't do anything. But now you have Excogitation again. Biolysis. Get the loot. Nice. And wait, was that out of war? I think that was out of war. Yeah, it was. That makes sense. I'm guessing the strategy there is that you're using out of war if something is missing. You've already dotted up everyone on your enemy list, so use out of war to like check in this guy so that you're also in combat with him, so you can dot him up. Is that right? That is my guess on the thought process. So more dots. Throw more dots. And there's Sacred Soil. Nice. And again, in the previous pack, you could have probably used Chain Stratagem on something, because it's going to be ready for the boss anyway, probably. So a tip on that, Agazel, is if you use any supporting action, Excogitation, on the tank, while they're in combat with like 3, 4, 5 dudes, you enter combat with all of them. So if you had used Excogitation once the Paladin had entered combat, you would probably not have needed to use Out of War to enter combat with the third Golem. I think. So like that is also a little trick. Now here, simply because of the amount of Fairy Gauge you have, like as you can see, now your Fairy Gauge is suddenly completely full. I would use Ether Pact on either yourself or the tank. Just because if you use it early, then it can, you know, start to the reason I typically use Ether Pact very aggressively is because, now I talked about this a little bit earlier. Is the reason why Excogitation is so good is because it's like an insurance policy, and actually when you use Excogitation, your character actually pulls a piece of paper out like a contract or an insurance policy and throws it, because the best part about Excogitation isn't the healing that it does, it's the fact that if anything goes wrong, you have that. Like, you have that, if nothing else. So I will use Ether Pact if the tank is nearing 50%, just to see how long I can save it and keep it, because as long as Excogitation is on the tank, they're not going to die. Probably. So that's what I would do. You say, I thought of that, but the Excog is still on the tank. That is a fair point. Like, you want, like, your original reasoning for not using Excogitation, as you explained to me, was, well, often it doesn't do anything. Like, it just ticks out after combat while the tank is full, so it doesn't do anything. But the entire value in excogitation is actually more the insurance policy of its presence than the healing that it can do. To me, anyway. That is also why I don't use it nearly as much when I'm like raid healing as a scholar, because who do I put the insurance policy on, right? Who do I put the insurance policy on? Cash says, in extreme cases, some endgame tank busters without enough mitigation will kill through excog. That is true. If your tank dies past 50% to 0, then excogitation does nothing. So that is also something to keep in mind. But yeah, keeping it, like, if you're doing trials or a normal raid or something, then, like, the key here is more casual content, right? Then excogitation on the tank is not as crucial, because who knows if the tank you're actually using excog on is going to be tanking in 45 seconds. Like, they might just flip it. And often the passive healing from your pet is going to be just fine for what the tank needs. But in an extreme, or a savage, or an ultimate, there's probably everyone knows who's tanking. And the tank is probably going to take a lot of damage when they take damage. So unless you need that ether flow for something else, you can use it. Like, one of the key reasons why I think why you might, like, why scholars got excogitation is because it's a way to spend an ether flow for the future. Like, if you don't have anything to spend your ether flow on right now, you can use it on excogitation, and then maybe it turns out to be helpful in the future. Now the reality is that you just use it on energy drain, right? I'll save it for later. The second boss fight is where I was practicing slide casting but failed a bit. Well, let's focus on that then. That worked okay. That worked fine. Oh, you had a toe in the AoE there. Let's see. Let me just focus on this. I'll ignore a bit the healing and just focus on the slide casting performance here. Just a moment. Silas is there. Royal. No, you didn't delay. There was no delay there, so that's fine. No failure. So the failure conditions of a slide cast is either if you do it too soon and the spell fails, or you slide for so long that your GCD is ready, so you're losing out on casts. Also, hey, Skeleton Orchestra. Hope you're doing well. I saw you also moved your pet there. I think, or was that Sacred Soil? There. Nice. Nice. There was no delay there. Very good. I don't think you failed on the slide casting. I think maybe what happened was you didn't slide cast very much. Let me take just a random example of one of your casts. So I can't remember. Was your latency 200, or was it? Or like, if we assume that you have no latency, then your slide cast starts now. Like, now you're slide casting. Technically, you could slide cast now. If your latency is like 200 ms, then it becomes a little muddy, but you might be able to slide cast like here. And it says 064 here, around 100 or below. Then it's closer to here, right? But something, well, like, if it's 200, then technically anything below 09 could work. But if your latency is 100, then you should be able to slide cast on 0.7. Typically, most players, I feel, can probably slide cast around 0.6, but you are 100% in the clear when it's less than 0.5. Like when this says less than 0.5, this is a slide. Like you're technically slide casting now. You're just not sliding anywhere. You're just not sliding anywhere. But yeah, waiting until it's decidedly below 0.5, as Licky suggests, is a good idea, because if you're at 18 ms, then like actually this isn't a slide cast, but this is. Like it's really strict. The thing is with slide casting is it is really strict and yet really weird. But if you don't want to risk it, slide cast is safe when this is under half a second, right? So here you could slide cast. You could like, let me just see around here. Skylight is a slide casting is super weird with relation to ping. I play at over 200 ms latency and it only works at 0.44 or below. There you go. Even more reason to not play with fire, or specifically play with fire when you're broiling, because you're casting small fireballs. It seems looks like fireballs almost. But yeah, around half a second before the cast is done, you can slide cast. Because the slide cast itself is directly correlated with the animation lock at the end of a cast. I talk about this in my GCD short, I believe, a little bit, about animation lock, and I talk about this in my slide casting short. But yeah, you can see here. Consistently, it always works if I do it with half a second left. So that is the trick. Sometimes you can greed it a little bit more, but it is half a second. But what I think you did most of that fight was you waited until now and moved. How do you measure MS? Oh, we played around with that on Discord. It's a little complicated. You need like the IP address and things like that. You can ping the server. What was it? I can't remember which tool we opened. You can ping it from your command terminal. There was also something we could open. I can't remember if it was in the task manager or what it was, where you could see it. Just spelled out, pretty much. When you typically measure it, performance manager. Is it this? No. I'll have to figure it out at a later point. I don't really want to fiddle with that during the stream, but yeah, it is usually about. It is something you do outside of the game. Jacob says, I literally slide cast on feeling. Exactly, like that is the thing. Who was it that said that? Jacob said, I would just go to a target dummy and experiment for a few minutes. Very good way to get it like muscle memory. The reason I have a hard time finding it, Skylight, is because my computer's language is Danish, so it is not called the performance manager on my computer. It's not even called performance anything. There's also the trick you can use that, as Ymir suggested, is if you put an emote on your bars, you will actually see that it lights up when the slide cast window begins. You can see when it goes under half a second, the emote actually lights up, like you can use it. That is also a trick to get a feel for it. Just put an emote anywhere where you can see it and then practice. Skeleton Orchestra says, I'm trying to find the actual stat change that attacking from the rear gives for a new friend, since the Hall of the Novice says it increases accuracy. A couple of people said it was removed. Do you know? I believe you used to have a higher accuracy when attacking from behind, when accuracy was a stat in the game. This was removed when direct hit was added in Stormblood. Direct hit basically was overriding all accuracy stats in the game. If you're fighting something on level with you, you cannot miss unless you're blinded or have accuracy down. But aside from that, you cannot miss. The only reason you have to actually attack an enemy from behind specifically is if you have a tooltip that says that it does more damage from behind. In all other situations, it does not actually matter. And the Hall of the Novice might say it, but the problem is that the Hall of the Novice is severely outdated. Like, incredibly outdated on a lot of subjects. Fortunately, it still tells healers to attack. So if you ever meet a healer that says they don't want to attack because they're a healer, you just tell them to maybe do the healer tutorial for the game. But yeah, exactly, Kazari. I can't and I have to figure out what the thing is called in Danish, and that means I have to Google a little bit. Direct hit is a chance to do more damage, just like crit. There's just other crit. Kind of weird. So, right, for this part, we're back to the way that Gazel prefers to do it. So we have the the recited Adlocurium, and no excogitation at all. And there's the Seraph again. Just pointing out once again, I'll see if I can count when your pet actually does something. You used Whispering Dawn there. There, your pet actually did something. Like there, it actually would, like if you hadn't used Seraph, you could have, it would have used Embrace. And there it healed again. And then you use Consolation again. So my advice, just my tip on the Seraph thing is like, use it when your Adlocurium shield breaks. Like just wait a few seconds. Just you can use it as like a predetermined part of your pull. There's nothing wrong with that. My advice, simply put, on this specific pull is you should use Seraph now. Like around, like if you want to use it at a specific time, it would be you would be served a lot better if you used it now. You would have 11 more seconds where your Seraph actually gets to do stuff. Because it spent the first 11 seconds of the cooldown just kinda hanging out. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. Using Seraph on the first pull is not a bad idea, because then there's a better chance that Seraph will be ready for the boss in case you need it. But my advice is mainly just wait a little bit. Like just instead of using it instinctively at a specific time, wait until your tank will actually benefit from it. That would be my advice on the Seraph thing. Other than that, as we can all see, it doesn't... like, Gazel can play both styles. It's perfectly fine. The only thing that I would say is that you could absolutely just add excogitation to your strategy. Like, if you find Dark Knight tanks difficult to heal sometimes, adding excogitation for some extra healing just as a fixed part of your plan might be a good idea. There's also one other thing that... there was the mage limit break, very nice. One other thing that I hope I'm not the only one noticing. I feel like there's like cobwebs. Like there's like a little... like some cobweb appearing around this button. You know what I mean, guys? Like this bar is like... It has like dust appearing around it. It's like and it's looking a little faded. It could get a little cleanup assistance. It could really make do with that. It's actually like over here. There's not actually like a hole, like a closed wall here. It's actually open and just spilling out. It's just a waterfall of fairy gauge. But Gazel said that themselves. They said, I don't think I used my fairy gauge very well. So yeah, I would want to point out that it appears that you didn't use it, so that is not entirely inaccurate to suggest. You might benefit from using it more, but counterpoint to that is when you have a good tank in a dungeon. When you have a good tank in a dungeon, you get put in an interesting spot sometimes. Because if you follow the strategy that I outlined in my Scholar's Short, where you use your pet actions first and then your own stuff, except for Excogitation and Sacred Soil, often you will have Ether Flow to spare. You will have Ether Flow to spare, Ether Flow ready, you will have Fairy Gates ready, and you will have pet cooldowns ready to use and no one to use it on. What do you do then? Like, what do you do? What takes priority? And the answer is whatever you like. Like, Whispering Dawn is going to be back in 60 seconds. Your Fairy Gauge requires you to do something to get it back. So what you think is less valuable, you can just throw at the wall. Just, I don't need this. So you didn't need Ether Pact in this entire run. You didn't need it. It seems. But you could have possibly saved a different cooldown if you had used it. Is what I'm getting at. Like, you could have used something different if you had used it. Now, you didn't. And that's fine. No one died. That's the thing. That is what I was talking about at the start, before we even reviewed this in the first place, is it doesn't matter if your if the strategy leads to no one dying, then it was successful, right? So, overall, good job. I think that is actually a very good video demonstration. Oh, Kits and Echoes here. I think it's a very good video demonstration because you used two different strategies throughout the video. To showcase that you can do whatever. As long as you're using your buttons, it's fine, right? But that, my suggestions are primarily, do what you like. I would recommend using Excogitation a bit more, even if it ends up healing for 0. The insurance policy effect of it is very nice. And use Seraph when the healing is helping, instead of using it at a strict timing, might also be good. And use Ether Pact a little bit more, would be my suggestion. Prioritize a little bit higher than some of your other cooldowns if the bar is full. That is what I would suggest. Now, let me see if there's anything I strictly forgot to answer throughout the comment section. If you feel like I forgot something that you asked earlier, then you can just write it again. Kids and Echo says, Carpenter, I had my questions about that hot pink wood being used in housing. Well, I like the color, so there. Counterpoint, I like it. Exactly, Darius Rabin. That is also what I was talking about earlier. The value in Excogitation is much less in the healing it actually did. Or does. And way more in the insurance policy. Your tank knows I'm safe, I have a safety net. You, the scholar, know that the tank is safe. We have a safety net. But of course, if it ends up healing for nothing, the optimizing player might look at it and go, that's a little wasteful. I could have used that for even some damage and it would have been fine, right? Skeleton Orchestra says, is there a site you use to make the opener graphics you use in videos? Yes. I use this site to make the rotation sequences. I often zoom in or out on the page to get it to have a specific amount of actions per line. Then I take a screenshot of it, put it into GIMP, and then I manually remove the gray background so that it's see-through. Eric Miller says, I also feel like a lot of tanks don't really use arm's length. Yeah, GIMP. It is a free alternative to things like Photoshop. Yeah, I could imagine, like, the thing is that in the defense of the players not understanding how to use arm's length, is that it is a little weirdly worded. I'm pretty sure that the tooltip is a little dated in the way that it is worded, because I'm pretty sure if they had made arm's length like in Endwalker, it would have read something like creates a barrier that nullifies most knockbacks and drawing effects, and if you are hit, applies named debuff, which could be slow, to attackers. And then it says duration is 6 seconds, and then it would say slows effect, or whatever they decide to call it, and then say slow 20%, and nothing else, because they already explained that it's applied when you're struck, right? So it's weirdly worded, because it just randomly mentions as an additional effect that it also does slow when the barrier is struck. Like, it's just a little weird based on how tooltips are normally written. Like, this one is also a little bit weird. It says additional effect gradually restores HP. And Jacob also mentioned slow is also a term that is weird for us listeners, as we think it's from movement speed. Slow has always been used as actions take longer in Final Fantasy games. Yeah, the thing is that the only way to learn this is by reading the tooltip, because 100% of actual like movement slow effects are either called straight up heavy or has a unique name and mentions that it slows your movement. And all attack speed slows are called slow. Weird. But it is consistent. I think part of the reason why it is a lot more complicated in Final Fantasy XIV is because a lot of jobs used to have movement slowing effects. I go over this in the Black Mage and the Summoner history videos, but from what I could find, Blizzard 1 used to have like a 40% heavy on top of everything else it did. Like, it just also slowed things, heavied things by 40%. Like, Blizzard was literally World of Warcraft's Frostbolt. And then it also had the Umbral Ice mechanic. If I remember correctly, Miasma, which summoners don't have anymore, which was a second dot with a cast time to use alongside Bio, it also applied a heavy debuff and a healing received reduction for reasons. But what jobs have a heavy debuff now? Like, is Doton? Does Doton still slow? Yeah, this has heavy. This literally says heavy 40%. And then ranged physical jobs have leg raise for heavy. Does anyone else have it? Is there any other jobs that has heavy? Is that everything? I'm pretty sure that that's the only sources of the heavy debuff. And physical ranged gets leg raise. Kyle says, can I get a Sage demonstration played in a dungeon? I have, it is a while back, but I actually have a stream. If you see, for instance, the stream from Tuesday, there's the VOD called Oops All Dark Night. If you scroll back through the live section of my channel, there's actually an Oops All Sage equivalent stream VOD where I do content as Sage, Expert Roulette, level 90 dungeon, things like that. So you get a lot of demonstrations of how Sage actually plays, if you would like if you would like that. If you're having trouble finding it, I can also see if I can find it. There it is. Hey Lemon, I hope you're doing well. Hey Craigon says, I warrior a lot, but I will admit I do forget arm's length occasionally. I think part of the reason why warriors would forget arm's length is because the sheer power of bloodwetting means that you typically don't reach the point where you have to use arm's length, like vengeance, rampart, and so on tends to carry you through the fights that you need to, right? So that's probably the reason you don't get to the point where you need to use arm's length. Gazel says, maybe it would be quicker to record yourself using Sage and post it for the next tea time. You know what? If you want to see some Sage action, let me just... It's going to be old. Look! Incredible! We have a Sage video from start to finish of doing Fell Court of Troya. Like, I have it. I have stuff. This is actually the level 90 footage I used for the Sage guide. And Sid is here in the footage. Yeah, I have it. That's why I'm just saying, like, we can watch this if you want. This is a 16-minute clip. Holy icon size. So, the reason why the icons are so big is because I have this specific UI for guides. Because it makes it easier for you on your phone, on your little phone, to see what I'm pressing if you're watching the guide on your phone. Or if for any other reason you're having a hard time seeing them, you certainly don't. When I make the icons that big. Sometimes it comes at a disadvantage to me because it is very disorienting to have the buttons be this big. I do this because I'm capable of playing mostly correctly with gigantic like hotbars anyway. Gazel says, I would love to watch that with full explanation actually. Well, we can do that. I will probably set the playback speed a little faster. So this is double speed, right? So I used Eucrasian Prognosis. Not actually sure why I used Prognosis for that. Oh, so that everyone has a shield. So here, by doing Prognosis and then Diagnosis, I have the equivalent effect to using Adlocurium deployment tactics. The closest you can get to a Sage doing that. I could have used Zoe for that, but I prefer to use it when I need it. So, we also have Cardion on the tank, of course. There is 6 targets here. So I don't use Eucrasian doses, similar to how I wouldn't use Biolysis because there are 6 targets in range. I'm not using Phlegma because there's going to be more targets to use Phlegma on later. But technically, I could use it now to get the cooldown rolling. So we go down this hallway. I don't always hit all of the targets, but it's mostly better than using Eucrasian doses, because what's going to happen is I'm probably going to be fiddling with like, oh, Eucrasia, and then target, and then doses, and then Eucrasia, and then target, and then doses, and then I'm going to miss GCDs because of that. So the overall damage difference is not going to be such a big deal. So here, as I explain in my Sage guide actually, my suggested opener on the first pull is once the tank reaches a standstill, use Keracholi and Heimer. And you just blindly do that. You don't even look at what the tank is doing. You're just going, Keracholi, Heimer. I don't care if you're using Bloodwetting. I'm using this. And then I choose a target. Now that I've placed my cooldown, my Heimer cooldown on the tank, I don't have to target the tank. So use Phlegma there. And Phlegm again. Technically, when we're talking about killing the thing with the most HP, I should have targeted this Trojan Scavenger. It's actually this Trojan Scavenger if we want to maximize it, right? Because this sentry is going to die much faster than everything else, and it doesn't help anyone. So, I don't do anything else other than attacking. Right around now, I will check on the tank, should I use Fizzes and Tafrokholi. I don't have to do that because there's only 2 mobs and the tank is fine, so this is going to require nothing from me for this pull. So I'm just going to keep cleaving. And Discretia is a gain on 2, so... And, as you saw right there, Eucratian Diagnosis, I didn't do the prognosis thing. But then we do dots because there's 4 targets. Now, what's the damage difference here? Discretia is 170, which means that on 4 targets, it would be 680, right? So Eucratian doses is 750, so for Sage, it is actually better to apply dots if there's 4 targets. So there's a little difference there, right? So because there is specifically 4 targets, this is the correct move, so that's what I do. Dot each one up, and then I use Icarus to jump to the tank because I was spending time targeting things, because I tend to target things literally in the world, because I actually had my tab target set up so that, like, as long as the enemies don't move, I can target them left to right. Which isn't always optimal, but it means that I can do all of the targeting with my keyboard instead of using my mouse, and I'm not actually that good at targeting things with my mouse. Yeah, so I like to adjust my camera a lot to be able to make sure that the target that is the next one when I click tab is the next one that I want. So I'll actually, like, if I want to target this, I will I will angle my camera so that I will target this, right? And I would have an easier time doing that than just clicking it, which is ridiculous, I know. Eric Miller says, is the sleep skill even useful for anything in this game except that one boss fight in Bravelock's long stop? Do people use it for that? Do people actually use it for that? I didn't even really... I have soloed the lizard boss in Bravelock's long stop at, like, minimum level with Sage, and I didn't realize you could sleep something in that fight. That is pretty funny. I'm guessing the ad can be slept? Yeah, the most prominent reason to use sleep is for solo content. Now, the key reason why my Sage has repose on its bars is because there's space for it. That's it. That's the only reason. I have space for it, so I put it there. As you will notice, my Scholar does not have repose on its bars. White Mage has it there. Astrologian... Nope, I actually have space for it, but I don't even have it. Alif says, I need to let my party know if I'm going to sleep something, but a lot of them just attack the mobs. Yeah, exactly. The only time it would work is if you can actually announce it beforehand. And yeah, I do have a mansion, Angel. Yeah, even if the tank is dead, you would need to announce it for people to actually respect your sleep, pretty much. You can also see here, mobs are stacked. So I started using Discretia because there was no more mobs that I could use apply dots to. Mobs are stacked. Heracoli, Panheimer. This is what I teach in my guide. Second pack, start with Keraholi, Panheimer. You can also flip them if you believe the second pack is more dangerous because Heimer is stronger on a single target. And then I just spam Discretia, and then there's a Flemmer on the tankiest target, which is the Scavenger. And then we just spam, and spam, and spam. And here is where I start to go, should I use Fizzes and Tafrokholi? Don't do anything yet, apparently. So it turned out it was fine. You can also, I just want to announce, you see the summoner used Rekindle on the tank. So we actually had some extra healing coming in. Right, and then we have the Eucrasian prognosis and the diagnosis, it looked like. Again, I want to point out, I did that like a few times throughout the dungeon, because in the guide I suggest that you can. So in a normal dungeon, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do Eucrasian prognosis, Eucrasian diagnosis. I did it specifically because I had like a list on my other monitor going, oh, you need to have a recording of you actually doing this in a dungeon. So I did it in a dungeon, but I wouldn't normally do that. It's an option, but you don't have to do it. So this pool, like this boss, is really, really boring. Not much happening. Like, it's literally just like me just spamming Disgracia for the whole thing, pretty much. Farak says, sleep is also useful as a blue mage for those masked carnival weekly tasks that require you to apply a certain number of different debuffs. But you don't even need to use sleep for that, because you could use, like, I believe blue mage has like 2 spells that apply sleep. I suppose if you need the spell slot, then sleep is fine. But I learned to live without it because blue mage used to not have sleep. It's actually funny, Paladin only has, like, it actually has only more healing than, like, Dark Knight, typically, because every time you do a 1-2-3 combo, you get 1, like, Divine Might to heal you, and it takes way longer to get to that, because your combo is 7 steps instead of 3. Which means Gunbreaker and Warrior would have more passive healing, but because Paladin gets like 4 extra every minute with Requiescent, it makes it a little better. Yeah, this boss is like very, very, very simple. This is the most interesting part, and you just have to dodge one thing. Angel asks, have you decorated your plot inside? Arya and Sip, which you may have seen on other streams, like the extreme streams and the mount farming streams, has done some interior work. We can take a look at it after the Sage review here. But I have actually done something. Like, there is something. I haven't done very much. I've done very little myself. I got some friends to help me because they like decorating plots. Element says, holy, having a 2.5 second cast time messes me up so much. It has a 1.5 second cast time, but generally you shouldn't cast holy. Holy. Oh, you said holy. Sorry, I was still in paladin territory. Holy has a 2.5 second cast time. That is true. I have heard a lot of people complain that holy has a long cast time because of that. You can actually still slide cast it. Like, it can be done. You just don't get very far. You feel like a black mage. It is difficult. Eric Miller says, weird question, but could you show me what you're supposed to do in the Ishgardian Restoration to level crafters? I actually have a guide on everything in the firmament. The primary thing is the crafting part. I think that's a relatively short part. It is actually mindless crafting to level crafters there. It can get expensive. Most people that actually, I think most people that say that the firmament is an excellent place to level your crafters leveled it when the firmament was current, like when people actually did it. And because people don't really do it anymore, the only motivation gatherers have to go to the firmament is to farm materials. if you want to sell them, which means that the only time you actually get materials to buy to level your crafters from the firmament is if it is economically viable for a gatherer to go and do it, which means that, as you say, it's going to be very expensive. Gazel says, so are we okay to clip on White Mage? I'm assuming you mean clipping your GCD? Or what do you mean? If you're not in a rush to level your crafters, my recommendation is do the daily Grant Company hand-in. That gives a ridiculous amount of XP for the amount of time it takes. And then do any tribal quests that are for crafters that are within a reasonable level range. Like if it's too low level, you get nearly no XP. Like if it's from a previous expansion, it gives very little. So it's complicated. So that would be what I would recommend. After that, do like live quests or something. Gazel says OGCDs between White Mage Holy spam. I would say if you have to stop to do any OGCDs with White Mage, like you're spamming your Holy and suddenly the tank needs healing, right? This is going to take a little bit because I actually need to wait for the Lily to come out. So you're just spamming away, and suddenly your tank needs help with something. Your tank already needs help, you have to weave something, right? So what you do is, instead of just like clipping the GCD, you stop Lily, Tetra, Divine Venison, for instance. You can also do the Black Mage thing sometimes, and you do Swift Cast, Holy, and then As Eyes, for example. But that still clips your GCD a bit, so that's not as good. But you can do that. And Rubox suggests leveling your gatherers there as well. That is actually a good point. The best way to circumvent things being stupidly expensive to level in the firmament is to just get your own materials from the firmament. But you can see here I do the Eucratian diagnosis thing here again. And then dot, and dot, and dot, and dot, because there's 4 of them. And now I've dotted everything, so just spam. You can see I do a bit like how Gazel did. I have a very strict sequence, so everything's stacked up. And I actually also just kind of skipped over that earlier. We can see Gerholi, Panheimer, and we just spam. Oh, by the way, loot. The loot mode. I think I actually clipped my GCD there to loot. And again, because the tank was really strong, I didn't really get to show off the second part. Then we have a boss fight. There, it's a lot more complicated to explain what to do in a boss fight, right? But for the most part, if you want a tip for Sage once you get to level 78, is Keraholi is overpowered. Keraholi is overpowered. Just like every time there's AoE damage either incoming or people need healing, I just click Keraholi. And because of the short cooldown, it is almost always available. So you can see I don't really... I used an Adder Sting there for some mobility, and I didn't even need it. There was Ixoholi for some healing. I don't know why I used that instead of Keraholi, but there was Keraholi for some extra healing. And the tank got the Doom debuff, so it's sooner on that. So this is something that is often messed up by players, is if you see this icon, you know, the Doom icon, right? There are 3 possible scenarios. Option 1 is there's no bar over it. That means that either... well, actually, option 1, let's say that, is there's a blue line over it. That means that you need to use Asuna. Option 2, there's no bar over it, means that you need to heal the tank to full, or the person to full, or the player that got the debuff needs to do something to survive. like something on their end to deal with it, like in Sunken Temple of Khan, where you have to step on a platform. Rubok says Physis 2, then Kerakoli, and you can forget about healing for the most part. Well, the thing is, my perspective on that is that often 100 potency every 3 seconds is plenty, and 130 potency is, well, 143 potency is plenty, but 250 potency per tick is not necessary. I would rather use Kerakoli, then Physis, and then Kerakoli again, to get 45 seconds of heal over time instead of using both at once. That's what the advice I give in my Sage guide is split them up if you're doing dungeon pulls. Like in a raid situation, if you need a crazy amount of healing, then you can use both if you want to, but there the situation is more likely you're using Physis because you need healing and using Kerakoli because you need damage reduction. And then it just, you know, it's damage reduction with healing on it. But aside from that, you're right, it heals for a ridiculous amount if you use both. And Licky says, let the bard deal with Doom. Yeah, that would work if we had a bard. Eric Miller says, I do have a small budget of 15 million. I was hoping that's enough. I would say do the daily Grand Company hand-in. If you're really in a hurry, still do the Grand Company hand-in. And then work on lives. I don't know if 15 million is necessarily enough. It depends on how many levels you need. Loot is more important than your own GCD. And removing Doom is more important than your own GCD. Fortunately for that. But you can see, like, the thing is, this might not be the most interesting because I have a like strict sequence that I follow when I do this. Like I am specifically doing a dungeon to gather footage of me explaining the cooldown order, so I do that. So I will stick to that. You can see that took a little while before the Kerakoli came out, but the last mobs weren't there yet, so I kept it until the damage was maximized. Now here's an interesting thing. Do we get a mage limit break? Or a ranged physical limit break? Oh, there it is. I used Physis because Kerakoli's heal over time ended. And then I used Tavrokoli. Now you might be wondering, why did you use Tavrokoli when the healing was unnecessary? The 10% damage reduction was important. And now again you might be saying, but you could have waited until the healing was necessary. I could, but I'm going to be using Kerakoli in 15 seconds. I'm going to do that anyway, so using Tavrokoli now is basically free. Like, the benefit of using Tavrokoli is the damage reduction and the mana kickback that I get from using it. That's the only reason I'm using it. Now, the thing is, I might not use Kerakoli now because everything's dead. But that's the strategy. That's the strategy that I demonstrate in the guide. I might even have used that specific clip for explaining that sequence because that was the only time I did it in this clip. And then we have the final boss, which is kind of long. Let me just speed it up a little bit more. We have more than 1 GCD per second. There's not much to say about this. For instance, I forgot to... I was slow on reapplying my dot there, as you could see. And then I'm not slide casting, I'm safely moving. That is an advantage that healers have because they have like the full second after every cast. That was also what Gazel did. You don't really need to slide cast much on a healer, simply because you have that free second every time. Yeah, in a savage context, you're also in the interesting position as a sage that do you use Tavrokoli before the tank gets hit so they have the damage reduction, or do you use it after to heal them? I don't know what's best. It depends on the situation, right? Does the tank need the damage reduction or not is the big question. And also a funny thing that I like to do when a dungeon is drawing to a close is around here, I start to very aggressively use cooldowns. like extremely aggressively use cooldowns because, well, the boss isn't going to last much longer. Right? Kyle says, have you ever done Savage or Ultimate content? Ultimate, no. In Shadowbringers, I raided in a Savage group, in a static, in the second raid tier. And we did E5S and E6S, and we progressed quite a lot on E7S, and then the group broke apart, and I'm not super motivated to Savage raid without friends. So that has a huge impact. But before I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and even when I took a break from Final Fantasy XIV during Stormblood, I have always, like, I've raided pretty hardcore in World of Warcraft for years. Normally I play a tank, but I've also healed and DPS'd in like Heroic and later Mythic, when that was the hardest thing. So I have a lot of experience with hard content, just not exactly a huge, like, extremely vast amount of trophies in Final Fantasy XIV. I have the knowledge to teach you how to play Savage, but I don't necessarily have all of the trophies to say, oh, and by the way, you can take my word for it because I did this specific fight or something, right? I hope that makes sense. Angel says, using it for tank busters that give dots. That is true. So I actually bring this up in one of my somewhat recent videos. Somewhat? Is it a month ago? I think it was the 10 mechanics the game doesn't explain. Snapshotting? Dot snapshotting. So dots, so damage over time effects, and HOTS, healing over time effects, actually don't care about what buffs you have at the very moment every tick. They only care about the buffs and debuffs you had when you used them. And that applies universally to everything in the game. Also bosses, they also snapshot dots. What that means is that if you're a bard, for example, and you apply your dots without buffs, they do a certain amount of damage. Then you use a buff, your dots don't really care. Not at all, in fact. But if you reapply your dots with the damage buff up, they will do more damage. But they will actually continue to do more damage after the buff ends. That is snapshotting. Dot snapshotting. The easiest way to see it is in PvP. The most brutal example is if you're a scholar, you apply Biolysis, your dot, to an enemy player while they have guard up. That makes it do 90% less damage. Then, if you spread it to everyone else, because deployment tactics works on your dot in PvP, the copy of Biolysis will also only do like 10% damage to everyone else, because it copied the sickly, sad, guarded dot from the original target. So it's like, it's really painful. But this also applies to bosses, which means that if the boss's tank buster has a dot component, and they actually often do in Savage raids nowadays, if you go as, I don't know, a warrior, go, well, I can take it with no cooldowns, I'll live, I'll take like 90% of my health and damage, but I'll survive, I can heal afterwards, then your healer's going to hate you. Because the dot that follows will hit like a freight train every 3 seconds because you didn't do anything. And then the tank goes, oh no, I'm having a hard time healing, I should probably use Vengeance, so you take 30% less damage, but it doesn't change anything. You're still taking ridiculous amounts of damage. Why? What's happening? I used a defensive cooldown. Yeah, but the dot doesn't care about that. It's already in. You let it in with gates open. So now it's wreaking havoc for free and you can't do anything about it. And that applies to all content. dot snapshotting is universal. And anyone who tries to tell you different do not understand how damage works in the game. I actually had to go through several log examples to prove to some players that believed that the P6S, this dot, works on black magic, was their argument. No, the damage is random. Kyle says you should probably demonstrate slide casting on the black mage. Actually, my slide casting short primarily demonstrates it on the black mage. Exactly, Eric. It also makes reprisal much more crucial to use, because when there's a raid wide with a dot component, then everyone gets wrecked. And Rubox also says Tabruhole is also good on tank busters with various hits. That is true. If you use, like, for instance, if you use Tabruhole after the first hit so that the healing actually is spent on something, that could be really huge. As long as the tank doesn't rely on your cooldown for the first hit. Which they shouldn't. They shouldn't. Does Thornmarch EX drop a mount? I'm pretty sure it does. Doesn't it? Maybe it doesn't. I suppose it doesn't. No, it does not drop a mount. Does not drop a mount. For some reason, it doesn't drop a mount. Ultimus Bane does also not drop a mount. It is really hard to slide cast with Black Mage because most of your spells take up the full cast time. It's even worse with Despair, Fire 4 and Flare because they take more than the full cast time. Matthew says, for ground targeted heals or dots, the snapshot of your buffs is on placement, but the target buffs and debuffs is on application. So for example, Asylum buffs itself after the first hit. That is actually really interesting. That is a really good point. But that is also doubly so because did you know that Sacred Soil is actually stronger than Keraholi? Did you know that? Did you know that? Do you know how that is? So Keraholi ticks 5 times because it's a heal over time effect. It ticks every 3 seconds. 5 times in 15 seconds. Sacred Soil also does that, but ground targeted heals and dots like Salted Earth Doton and Sacred Soil and Asylum actually does an extra heal right when you place it. So Sacred Soil is actually 600 potency and not 500. Assuming that everyone stays in it, which is rather easy nowadays. Like, it's actually impressive if you don't, if you manage to get out of it. Eric also says, they should also tell you that it's not additive. I've seen tanks use Rampart and Vengeance together in harder trash pulls like Holminster. Yeah, the thing is that they don't understand that if you use both cooldowns, then they don't have anything for later. Like, they're probably not using Vengeance and Rampart because they think they stack additively. I think they use them together because they think that their job as a tank is to minimize the damage they take. Which is kind of true. Like, kind of true, but not completely true. The purpose of the tank is to, you know, take a survivable amount of damage and minimize the amount of damage that the healers have to heal. So if you need Vengeance and Rampart to survive, then using Vengeance and Rampart together is fine. The key thing is that using Vengeance and Rampart together leads to taking 44% less damage and not 50%, which is also something I go over in in that video about 10 mechanics the game doesn't explain. And alright, Kyle, see you later. If you need that much, you should use Holmgang. Well, that is also a possibility. I think it depends on context. I think it depends on context. Because you can also use Holmgang after. Like, if you still have HP, you can use Vengeance and Rampart, but if you're already close to dead, then Holmgang is the only thing that can save you. And if you just use Holmgang first, then it's going to run out much sooner. So it's complicated. In a dungeon pull, however, you should not need Vengeance and Rampart together. You shouldn't. Lemon says, are Ultimus, Bane and Thornmarch EX still like the old version? Yeah, they should be the old version. And Jacob is right. Ethereal manipulation is really good for black mages. The problem is that you can't use it without clipping your GCD unless you swift cast something or instant cast something. So that is the thing. That is also something we talked about earlier. If you don't understand how the black mage in your group thinks, then you don't understand why the black mage is staying in the telegraph for so long. But they typically do that because they have planned what they're going to do about it later. Ice Leviathan says, I'm sure opinions vary, but Paladin was my least favorite job by far until level 76, and then the complexity of trying to set up an optimal burst with what I have made it way better. I see what you mean. I see what you mean, since Atonement give you a lot more options to do that. Personally, I feel like the job gets already becomes a lot more interesting at level 64 when you get Divine Might, and then it really builds at level 68 when you get Requiescent. You don't have that much ability to optimize your burst, but the important thing is that because of the damage difference between the perfect burst and the second best burst, which is Holy Spirit and 2 Atonements, as the filler, is so little that spending any effort at all trying to set up Holy Spirit, Royal Authority, Holy Spirit is actually a bigger DPS loss than it is a DPS gain because of the burst itself. It's always better to just go with whatever you have and not postpone Fight or Flight and not waste Atonements. Like, it's a little sad that it is like that, but it is like that. Ice Leviathan says, I was wondering if I missed something about low-level Paladin. Paladin from level 1 to 50 is basically the only change it got with the rework is that Fight or Flight has a shorter duration. Most of the changes to the job were added for above level 50. Like, Bulwark that you got back, you get at level 52 even. So not even that counts. Yeah, exactly, Matthew. Well, wait, what? Asylum's initial hit is also buffed. Well, there you go. Interesting. Gazel says, should you use Holmgang with a me target macro? I saw someone mentioning it before. Just a moment. Holmgang is one of the weirdest buttons in the game because it has, let's see, 2 effects that are not on the tooltip. Now, I think you can. Some old timers that played Warrior in Stormblood or before might know what the first one is. But the second thing is if you use Holmgang on something, like for instance I use Holmgang on this, it prevents them from moving for 10 seconds, and it actually works on some bosses. It used to also bind yourself, and you used to not be able to use it without a target. And as Jacob says, in 2.0 it didn't even have any defensive value. Now, if you're bound to the floor, that actually made you immune to knockbacks. Like, it didn't just bind you so you couldn't move, it actually, like, nailed you to the floor, so you couldn't get pushed. So basically, Holmgang used to have a hidden arm's length on it as a side effect of what it did. Now, it still does that. It still has an arm's length effect built into it. That is the first thing. The second thing is that the duration of Holmgang itself, like on you, the immunity to dying is actually directly correlated to whether the target you snared with it is alive. So if I used Holmgang on something near death, it dies, then Holmgang ends. This actually came up in my most recent solo challenge stream. I used Holmgang to survive, but I used it on a mob that was about to die, so it just fizzled and disappeared again. But if you use Holmgang on yourself, then it is no longer tied to the life of anyone else, which means you're not snaring anything, but Holmgang will always last its full duration. This is only important when you're using Holmgang on trash packs. If you're using it on a boss, in most situations you're not going to die after the boss, and even if you do, it doesn't matter. But yeah, warriors can combine Inner Release, which makes you immune to knockbacks, Holmgang, which makes you immune to knockbacks, and Arm's Length, which makes you immune to knockbacks, for a combined 31 seconds of knockback immunity. like in extension of each other. That doesn't even change. Consider the fact that you can use Inner Release every minute. It is quite ridiculous. See, but yeah, if you use a macro for Holmgang that targets yourself, then you will never run into this problem. This introduces a different problem entirely, which is that macros tend to be a little janky and sometimes feel unresponsive because they don't have spell queuing. So that is a separate issue entirely. If you don't mind that, fine. Tristan says, "Warrior, I am the wall," in wall-to-wall pulls. Lemon says, "Do you have any motivational works for local Lemon, or anyone, with anxiety? I know I can probably do it, I'm just so nervous." My suggestion, Lemon, is use this. Go in with bots. They won't complain if you mess up. And the healer can take a wall-to-wall pulse. Like, as long as you don't overdo it. Like 2 or 3 packs at a time, the Conjurer here, they can take it. They can take it. So you can practice the pulls. They're just going to be really long because NPCs are terrible at AoE damage. But yeah, that's my suggestion. Remove the factor of messing up in front of other players. Duty support. You can also ask in the Discord lemon, ask if anyone has time for a leveling roulette or something. And then you might be able to get a 4-man together. We have a lot of people on EU after all. Gasel says, can you home gang yourself without macro? Yes, you do this. So I am attacking the boss, and suddenly I have to use home gang on myself. So I do this. Did you see it? I targeted myself. But yeah, the difficult part is you have to target yourself, and depending on how quick you are on your keys, that might cause you to clip the GCD. Some players have difficulty with that, and that's perfectly understandable. Eric says, is there any underrated secrets to make some gil right now without using crafters? Asking for a friend. I don't know if it is underrated, but if you have completed Island Sanctuary, make sure to try and optimize it so that you get as many island curries as you can. It turns out dye is valuable. And if you set up your Island Sanctuary, you might be able to get like just the cheap dyes that you can buy there, you can get like 18 of them's worth per day, 5 days a week. And most of these dyes sell for 10,000 gil or more, so consider that 18 dyes, 10,000 each. So that's like just a money printer just going 2,000 gil, thank you. So yeah, I don't know if that is an underrated method, but it is certainly a method that a lot of people forget. So I would say invest some time in the Island Sanctuary. Remember, Island Sanctuary costs this much to progress. This much skill to progress. You just have to do it. It only costs time. And once you've set it up and figured out how to do it, it just prints money. So like you have to invest the time once. That is of course, as Licky says, time is money. But once you've invested the time, it just prints money back to you. Another trick, which is again, it is a known trick. And it's not really a trick even. If you have crafters, you don't have to have max level crafters, you just need to have crafters at some level, like 50 even. This section, you know, with housing items, many of these items can sell on the market board for several times their crafting cost. Like you just buy the materials, craft the thing, and put it on the market board, and someone will buy it because other players are often too lazy to craft it themselves on the fly. Make sure to check what the item sells for before making it so you don't make a mistake. But yeah, try that. Like, look for obscure housing items, craft those and put on the market. Sometimes you can make a killing. Fall Roborex says, when do you unlock Island Sanctuary? You can start on it when you have completed the Endwalker leveling story. Yeah, basically you just need to finish the you just need to see the credits for Endwalker. And then you can. Then it takes some days to level it up. Even it will still take you a while to set it all up. For being finished. I actually have a like simple starter guide for Island Sanctuary as well, like a guide video. But it is it only goes over like the basics of what everything is. It doesn't really like talk about optimizing. It only goes over what you can do and what might be worth considering, but it doesn't actually explain how to optimize it in the first place. Vicky says you can target yourself with F1. I mean, if you haven't changed it, yes. You know, the order of your party list is actually something you can customize. Go to the UI settings and the party list. You can actually choose manually which order the jobs are put in. And when people join your group, they're usually added from the bottom, but once you have some players, you can click sort party list, and then it'll sort it based on this. But you can customize it. There isn't really any logic to it. The only logic is melee ranged mage. And pretty much in the order they are added to the game. So you could optimize this. Like if you're a Dragoon main, when you're a Dragoon main, you could order it based on the order in which you want to use your Dragon Sight, for example, and then you can just have a macro that automatically targets down the list. You could do that. You could do the same with Astrologian, for example, but that might be problematic given that you have two different kinds of cards. And Kragon has a good suggestion. There's a Discord server called Overseas Casuals, which posts daily what the optimal setup is, and there are guides for like optimizing your island sanctuary in the first place. Angel says optimizing is painful on max rank because you're bound to run out of lava. Yeah, lava, rock salt, which other ones are good? Hemp, I've discovered recently. It's really annoying. And just to spite everyone, Aria here actually has 999 lava on her island sanctuary, but she doesn't actually use the workshop very much. But she grinded it just so that she had it. Vasadi says, about obscure housing items, I asked some of my friends to try to find me a housing item from Submersible, and specifically the new indoor fence thingy. Don't know about that. So, of course, most things that are exclusively from workshop tends to be a lot more expensive, but they're also very difficult to get on your own, so it's not super helpful as like money-making advice. Oh, just use your free company's workshop. You have that, right? And you have access to use that, right? Everyone does, right? Thank you, Skeleton Orchestra. And have a good day. But yeah, if you are on the EU data center in general, just to mention the thing Lemon was talking about, Lemon says, I have no friends aside from Kai. You have people you can play with at the very least. I don't know if they count if they're your friends, but you can always try and ask. We have a looking for group room on the Discord server. Let me just find that. So if you're not on the Discord community server, you can be on it. There is a weekly schedule where you can see what's happening. For instance, you could see days in advance that this stream was happening. You also got an announcement earlier today that the stream was happening. And there's rooms for discussing a whole bunch of stuff. Which probably also gives you a lot more opportunity to ask if there's something you don't understand or something you would like clarified. Like, there's a lot of clever people on that Discord that can help you with things that I might not even know, or someone that knows something specifically better than I do on a specific subject. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier in the stream, we were talking about the fact that excogitation is a nice insurance policy. Santo piped up and said, yeah, that is really nice, and that is really important coming from him, because Santo is a gunbreaker main that does savage raiding. Like, if they think that excogitation is nice to have on them as an insurance policy, even though they don't need it, then it's probably pretty good, right? And that's a pretty good, like, second opinion than just me saying it. Jacob says, fun fact, the Final Fantasy XIV submersible are partially made from carbon fiber and titanium. However, importantly, you regularly have to repair your submersibles in Final Fantasy XIV, so it's okay. It's okay if they make creaking noises as they submerge. But yeah, the LFG room isn't like super active, but you're genuinely like, we recently had a change. We made it was originally a forum. So like you had to post, I want to make a group for this, and then people would have to respond. We recently changed it to just a chat room. So if you need to make a group for something, you can just say, hey, anyone want to do this? You also just like go into the general room if no one's responding, be like, hey, does anyone want to do this? I'm talking about it in the looking for group room. Like if you want to play with people, you're welcome to like play with people and plan it on the Discord. That is absolutely allowed. Like the main value in this Discord community server is actually that you can talk with people and learn something from each other. So if you want to plan groups for stuff, you can. Sleepy says, a bit of an unrelated question. I don't know if that's unrelated to what we talked about earlier, but you forgot to ask earlier. Does a multi-hit tank buster or a multi-hit stack marker snapshot buffs and debuffs at the end of the cast? Each individual hit typically has its own snapshot. Which means that because you only know exactly when the first hit lands, because the first hit typically lands a few frames after the cast finishes, that is the only one you know for certain that your cooldown lands on. But if you have a multi-hit tank buster on you, using defensive cooldowns throughout the duration of it will work. This is something you could, for example, test on Golbez EX, the current extreme. Yes, a tank buster that hits 4 times for damage, and then like one big hit at the end. But he only casts it once. So if it snapshots at the end of the cast, then if you use something like Bloodwitting after the second little small rock lands, it shouldn't work on the final hit. But as far as I know, it does. So each individual hit has its own snapshot. And Angel says it snaps weirdly from what I noticed. Exactly. Because it doesn't have like a warning sign of exactly when it finishes, it is really difficult to know precisely when it lands. Harrowing Hell is the one where he slams his head into the platform, isn't it, Matthew? I'm pretty sure it is. That's the one where he smacks it like 7 times or something. Yeah, that one is also kind of weird. Harrowing Hell is a nightmare for healers and Savage. I want to point out that Harrowing Hell on normal is perfectly capable of wiping a group if the healers aren't ready. Like, P10N is capable of just wiping you if the 2 healers aren't ready for that. Usually, nowadays, it's not a problem because most groups end up having a white mage. You put down Liturgy of the Bell, and it's like you put like a silencer like right on the nose of the boss. But yeah, exactly. It is surprisingly evil for a normal boss mechanic. But yeah, that explains a lot then, Sleepy. You said, I've been taking a lot of damage from P10S and I was afraid I might be mitigating too late. Well, as you can hear from our other local Savage Raiders, P10S is weird. Specifically P10S is weird. Yeah. Oh, we have another one. I don't think I have time for much more. We have a high-level Dark Knight guide coming out in like half an hour. And then tomorrow I have a video that actually gives my 2 cents, 5 cents, what you would call it, on how to prepare yourself for Savage. It is similar to like how someone like Lemon says, how do you get over anxiety? How do you get over the fear of getting into Savage raiding? Like, typically the fear is overcome by being prepared. So I go over everything you need to be prepared for Savage raiding. And then on Saturday, I think we're doing 6.3 on Small Kai. I don't think we can also do 6.4. Because the post-gate Endwalker patches are weirdly long. And yeah. But yeah, also thank you all for coming and hanging out. I see Mihu Els, Kasari is here, and this was Angel, right? And this is Kitsuneko. Yeah, it is exactly. It's a guide on how you start getting into hard content, because it might be difficult to know where, like, how you start if you haven't even like tried it. And you just open Party Finder and what you see is like what's a good example? Oh yeah, this one is actually pretty good. Hector strats. H1 and MT taken. Alright? What does that mean? Things like that. That is actually explained in that guide. And also what you might want to prepare. By the way, Angel, what is your favorite role amongst ranged mage and ranged physical mage or healer? Liggy says it doesn't even say which of the 2 Hector strats it means. That's true. They need to add True North if they mean True North. Just what's your favorite amongst the roles? So not melee and not tank. And hey, K-Black, how are you doing? Lemon's here. Oh, hey, Angel, this is Lemon. This is Lemon. Exchange contact information. You just play whatever. Well, it's because you can have a thing. But if you like Black Mage, you can have it for Black Mage. Yep. There you go. It has my name on it as crafter, if that matters to you. So, if you want to keep that, then you shouldn't put it in your glamour chest. Aside from that, you can do whatever with it. But that is a good point. Like it is pretty funny. That this was actually something we were talking about earlier today as well. Is that there's this thing people have started on with using raid plans. So instead of actually explaining what the strategy they're using is, they just post this, and then you have to open this, and see what the plan is. The famous Caetsu signature. It'll be worth millions! Could you imagine? But yeah, aside from that, most of these descriptions are like the shortest hand they can make it to explain what strategy they're using, so that no one joins them that doesn't know the strategy they're using. And Coco came back from a nap. Huh. And nice, Angel. Almost everything maxed. But yeah, right. I think that is everything I have. I hope you enjoyed this casual hangout stream where we just talk about everything Final Fantasy XIV. Where we talked about some snapshotting. We talked a lot about healer stuff, scholar stuff. We actually watched an extra clip from the green hills of my recording folder for some extra content. If you want me to review stuff you did in the game for a future stream like this, there is a clip reviews room at the very top, and it should also be pinned. There is actually an explanation of how the room works, so if you're not sure how to go about it, you can read that. It's not super restrictive what you can post, but it's kind of important that you tell me what we are looking for, so that I don't spend time being confused too much, and so that we don't spend all the time looking at something that you weren't interested in. This can also be something funny happened, like you did a fight and your group wiped weirdly, or you survived a mechanic weirdly, or something like it. It can be a clip that you just want me to see. It can also be a clip that you want me to actually give you advice on. You might also get advice even if you just wanted me to see it, depending on what you do in the clip. That would be classic me. But yeah, if you want me to review something on these tea time streams, I try to do them around every other week, then you post your clips there. And if you want me to look at something I did myself, you can also post that. That is technically also allowed. Like a previous stream, you see me do something weird and you ask what's going on, or whatever you like, you can do that. We can do that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything else, so yeah. If you enjoyed the stream, if you like, you can give the stream a like. Then YouTube algorithm also becomes happy. You can also not do it if you didn't like the video. That is the stream. That's also okay. But other than that, that is everything I have. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out in game and in the stream. That's okay, Gilano. You were here at the start, and you were here in spirit. And this is Gilano. And yeah, I hope you all have a good afternoon, evening, morning, night, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you all so much for hanging out. See you very soon, and remember, Dark Knight Advanced Guide coming in like 20 minutes. Bye bye!